Have you been unable to pay your rent on time due to COVID-19? Here are the options for tenants who have not been able to keep up with their rent during the pandemic. How to respond to the rent moratorium. Number 1. A tenant must notify their landlord in writing that they are not able to pay their rent on time in full because of COVID-19. Email and text communication are valid forms of written notice. Number 2. Written notice must be provided to the landlord no more than 7 days after the rent is due. For example, if your rent was due between March 17th and April 7th, let your landlord know no later than April 14th. You should keep a copy of the written notice submitted for your records. A sample notice to the landlord and link can be found at the end of the video. Number 3. Within 30 days of the date rent was due, the tenant shall provide the landlord documentation or objectively verifiable information that the tenant is unable to pay rent due to financial impacts related to COVID-19. The tenant must provide the landlord with additional documentation for each month that rent is not paid. Examples of verifiable documentation include, but are not limited to, termination notices, payroll checks, pay stubs, bank statements, medical bills, childcare costs, commercial sales receipts, and profit and loss statements, signed letters or statements from an employer or supervisor explaining the tenant's changed financial circumstances, and lastly, the eviction moratorium in National City will remain in effect until September 30th, 2020. However, any rent not paid through September 30th will be due no later than December 31st, 2020. Please note that there may be a state or federal law that may change the terms of repayment of rent. Rent repayment. Be proactive in communication. Pay what you can. Consider entering a rent repayment plan agreement that works for you. Pay unpaid rent no later than December 31st, 2020. Inform yourself about resources available for emergency assistance to help pay for rent, utilities, and other basic necessities. For more information, please refer to the end of our video. Landlords should request rent payments that are past due. Should negotiate with tenants on a payment plan. Should request repayment after the moratorium ends. Should evict for non-payment on other just causes such as violation of lease or damage of property. Should not evict tenants claiming eviction protections. Should not charge late fees or penalties because of a delay in payment due to COVID-19. Should not evict a tenant that meets the requirements of the rent moratorium. And lastly, should not serve eviction notices including for no-fault reasons serving unlawful detainer complaints or charging late fees. Negotiate. Do not wait until the rent is due to provide written documentation of financial hardship due to the pandemic. Be transparent and provide communication with your landlord. Make sure you are current in your rent prior to March 27, 2020. Respond before 60 days to the landlord if you are served with an eviction. Basic rights. You are eligible to defer rent due to financial impacts related to the COVID-19 emergency. No landlord can take action to evict you for not paying rent on time or in full if you have provided written notice to the landlord on or before the date the rent was due or within a reasonable period of time not to exceed 7 days. No landlord can charge or collect any late fees for rent that is delayed, serve a notice of eviction, file or prosecute any action to obtain possession of the property rented by that tenant or otherwise try to evict you for non-payment of rent for causes related to COVID-19. No landlord can file or prosecute any unlawful detainer action based on a 3-day pay or quit notice or pursue a no-fault eviction. If you have been afforded protection under the ordinance, you have 6 months from the date the ordinance is effective, or the day Governor Newsom withdraws Executive Order N 2820, whichever comes sooner. Please keep in mind that nothing in the order relieves a tenant of liability for unpaid rent.